welcome to ADRA Insider. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your interest in the projects of ADRA Canada as we work to relieve the suffering of people in need around the world. I just wanted to give a brief introduction to our video broadcast today and let you know that while it may not look like it, here at ADRA Canada, we are following all of the recommendations from the Canadian government about keeping our social distance during this global pandemic that we're all facing today. The program that you're about to see was actually recorded back in the first week of January, and it is only now that we have had the opportunity to edit the program and share it with you. And so as you see the four of us sitting around this table, it may seem as though those people at ADRA Canada, they're not following the recommendations. But actually, we have at ADRA Canada, all the staff are now working from their homes. And in fact, this studio is actually a studio that I have set up inside my home. And it is allowing us to keep in touch with our supporters, with our constituents, through the medium of video. And so I just wanted to let you know that as you view our program today, just know that it was recorded back in the first week of January and that ADRA Canada is keeping the world safe by working from home. And so now I invite you to enjoy the video podcast we have prepared for you on a project that ADRA is conducting in the country of Rwanda. The Promise Project.
So welcome again to the ADRA Canada Insider podcast. If you were with us on our last episode, we traveled to Kenya, and today we're also going to go to Africa again, to Rwanda. So I'd like us to go around the table and introduce ourselves, and we can begin with our newest guest.
Thank you very much. My name is Anthony DeRocha. I'm currently serving as a senior advisor on the Embrace Project, which is running in Rwanda alongside other countries.
And I'm Steve Matthews. I'm the Executive Director for ADRA Canada.
Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you.
And I'm Frank Spangler, Media Specialist at ADRA Canada.
So I understand that we have two projects that are running in Rwanda right now. One is called the Promise Project. And one is called the Embrace Project, which is the one that Anthony, you're most involved with. But maybe we'll start with the Promise Project today. Frank, can you give us a little background on where that project is operating and what it's doing?
Yes, Promise is in what would be considered the driest region of Rwanda. And so it has unique challenges. Actually, ADRA Canada has been working in this part of Rwanda for many years, starting, I would say, shortly after the end of the genocide in 1994. ADRA began working here in partnership with the new government of Rwanda. With the help of the Canadian government, ADRA Canada entered this area and began to help the families that were returning from other countries. Many families had been living in other countries for safety reasons for many years, and now they were returning to Rwanda. The problem was they had no land to settle on. And so this dry region of Rwanda was opened up. Land was divided so that each family could have a small plot of land to grow food. And with funding from Canada, ADRA built homes for the people, they built water systems, they built hospitals for the communities, and schools for the children. One of the reasons why this part of Rwanda was so sparsely settled was because many of the valleys were quite swampy. Well, with some technical assistance from Canada, we were able to turn those swamps into beautiful rice fields. And I had the opportunity of visiting these communities a couple of times. And it was just so wonderful to talk to the people and have them share their appreciation to Canada for helping them get their community off the ground with all of these services. Now, that was in the 90s, But over the years, ADRA has continued to build on that project. And I think that's one of the things that I like the most about ADRA is that we don't just come in for a visit and spend, a month or two building a school and then disappear. We come in with a project and we stay for 2 or 3 years, but then we also build on that project in many cases and come in with a follow-up program that builds on the first one. And that way we're not leaving the community high and dry. And so, for example, we introduced what we called the LEAF project here in this part of Rwanda, where we encouraged people to plant a lot of trees. It was a kind of a reforestation project. But it also included, the planting of fruit trees and other kinds of trees, introducing concepts of agroforestry, mixing the growing of fruits, vegetables, and trees all together. ADRA helped villages set up small co-ops where, with some agricultural instruction and some drought-resistant seeds and some tools, groups set up large community gardens where people could not only use the vegetables to feed their families, but also have lots left over to sell to the people in Kigali for income. ADRA went also into the driest parts of the province and taught people how they could extend their growing season by using permaculture methods, such as buried clay pots that slowly release moisture to the roots of their vegetables. ADRA taught the people how to grow nutritious plants that actually love the dry zones and how to prepare and preserve those foods so that they will have enough to eat right through the dry season. And that brings us to our current project, the Promise Project. Promise, which I think is a wonderful name for a project. Promise was originally designed as a mother and child health project, where we were teaching women who were of maternal age how to have a safe pregnancy, how to go into the health clinics for regular checkups, how to eat nutritious food while you're pregnant, and then how to care for the baby when it's first born. And as it developed, we found that it grew into much more than just mother-child health. The men of the community saw how much the women were learning in their groups, and they wanted groups. So there was men's groups, and then there would be youth groups that started out of that. And it developed also into a group for unwed mothers. And so it has just kind of mushroomed into many aspects that has been so helpful for the community. We also have some partners on this project. We are working together with 2 other faith-based organizations. We have the Christian Children's Fund, or now actually they've changed their name to Children Believe, and also Emmanuel International. And working together with these partners and funding from the Canadian government, we have been able to bring a lot of instruction and food security to a lot of people in this dry region of Rwanda.
So in the women's groups, you mentioned they were learning about how to have safe and healthy pregnancies, to go do their prenatal checkups, and then how to care for the baby after it's born. If the men wanted to have groups, what were they learning? Did you get to see any men's groups while you were there?
Yeah, so when I was there, the men's groups were really interesting because they were talking about how much their lives have changed for the better because they've become part of these groups. What I liked about the men's groups is that you show up, and first off, a little bit about them is there's a group of men that came together and facilitated with ADRA, but then after the men started seeing the positive changes in their lives, they started going out and getting other men and bringing them in. So it went beyond just what ADRA was doing to the point that they bought into it so much that, hey, guys, you got to come and learn about this stuff because it's making our lives better. So the men were learning similar type of things, though, in that, the man does have a role to play in raising their child. It's not just something for the woman to do. One of them was telling me they used to, maybe they go into the field for a couple hours to help out, By noon, they'd go out drinking for the rest of the day. They'd come home drunk at night. They'd spend all the family's money. There was nothing left over for the children and the mother. So malnourishment was really a real problem in this area because men just spend all the money on alcohol. So now, I mean, one of the men, he was standing there. He had his arm wrapped around his wife, and with just this big smile on his face, and he said, my life is so much better. My wife is happier. We go to church now. I don't drink anymore. These are the types of changes that they were talking about, that they were seeing in their lives. Yeah, and I mentioned in our last podcast about from Kenya about being welcomed with song and dance. The men's group welcomed me with song and dance, which was quite interesting as well to see that.
Anita was telling us how in Africa information is transferred through song, dance, and skits.
Mm-hmm.
And what I enjoyed seeing was the men, on their own initiative, had come up with skits that illustrated the main principles of ADRA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so through the skits, they were passing on information to maybe other men and other villages and communities that hadn't joined the project, but they were spreading the ADRA message through their skits and singing and dancing.
Yeah.
Because it was all a men's group, they wanted to show women in the skits, so the men were dressing up as women.
That was really funny.
A few of the topics that they would cover in these meetings would be, for instance, essential nutrition acts for children. So it's important for men to understand the requirements both of their pregnant wives and their breastfeeding wives, but also their newborn children and their breastfeeding children. It's not enough for the women just to know that we need to exclusively breastfeed babies for 6 months, but the men need to know that kind of information as well, just for a more holistic, community-involved type of learning. So those kinds of issues and that kind of knowledge is what a lot of these men's groups and women's groups are aimed at raising awareness about.
So Anthony, you're talking about how the men are also learning about the nutritional needs of their wives and their children, and they find that relevant to them, because we're talking about men who seem to come from a society that are pretty hands-off of things in the household. How does it become relevant to them that they get so excited about it?
I mean, the culture over there does dictate that the man is the head of the home. If your family is not succeeding, then you're not succeeding as the head of that household. So that's kind of the view that they're coming from. So there is quite a lot of motivation from the men to be involved about what's going on with their newborns and what's going on with their breastfeeding or pregnant wives. Yeah,
I see. Okay. So we mentioned that there were a couple of different groups that have come out of this project. There's the women's group, which was there originally, and then the men's group, youth groups, and an unwed mothers group. Can you tell us a little bit more about what might have been going on in an unwed mothers group?
Yeah, so the Unwed Mothers Group, we got to meet these young ladies who were all there. They all had their young children with them. And the way that this community typically would deal with an unwed mother is when these young ladies became pregnant, they'd actually be forced out of the community. The challenge is that a lot of these young women become pregnant because of the economic situation in the community. They're being promised, I'll pay for your education. I'll provide you with food if you'll be with me. When they become pregnant, the man disappears, and nobody knows who the man is. So he just disappears, so now this young woman is there left to herself. They all had to drop out of school. I asked them, how many of you is the father involved in your relationship? Not one of them had the father even involved with the children. Then I asked, how many of you would want to go to school? And every one of them said they want to go to school. And I asked them, how many of you are in school? And none of them are in school. So this is what we're trying to get to, is to get to a point where they can actually be reintegrated back into school as well, and through this support network. That's kind of one of the goals. So it was interesting to be able to get to meet these young women, because they did retell how it has changed their lives, because they no longer feel like outcasts in their community. They do feel a part of the community, and they're no longer looked down upon the way that they would be before our project was there.
Yeah, one of them was telling me she now can walk down the road with pride holding her baby.
Yeah.
And that's the change. She can now go to church and feel comfortable going to church with her baby.
Yeah, that's very, very good to be able to hear those things.
Yeah.
Anthony was just talking about the importance of nutrition as well. And this being in a dry area of the country, they're not able to grow multiple rounds of crops throughout the year because part of the year was too dry to be able to grow. So we've taught them techniques of how to have their own kitchen gardens. We got to visit kitchen gardens along the way. These gardens are just filled with food and different varieties of food as well. When we were there, we got to visit a kitchen garden, but then they said, well, we're going to go. So they had taken what they learned from the kitchen garden and they had planted tree tomatoes. And they had a couple of hectares of tree tomatoes that they've now turned into a business. So it's 5 people in the community that have created this business where they're growing tree tomatoes. So we're standing in this tree farm, and the trees they've got to be 10 or 12 feet tall. And I asked how long have these been planted, and they said it was about a year and a half that they had been planted. These trees are big, tall trees. So they went and picked one off the tree, and they gave it to me, and they said, well, here, eat it. And I'm looking at this thing like, I don't know how to eat this.
Yeah, what is a tree tomato? So
a tree tomato is, they're a bit more green, but I would almost term them a cross between a cherry and a tomato is what it seemed to me. It had an outer flesh that was a little more firm than a tomato that we would typically get here in Canada. But the inside was juicy and sweet. It was a really, really nice tasting fruit.
Yeah.
Well, our off-camera gentleman, Michael Kirkby, just informed us that they're also known as tamarillos, and you can buy them in Canada. So after you watch this podcast, run to the grocery store and get some tamarillos and taste what Steve is sharing with us right now.
Absolutely, because it was quite tasty. But as I'm standing there looking at this thing, one of them looked and said, "You're in Africa, you're going to eat like an African. This is how you do it." And they bit the end off of it, and then you could get all the flesh out of it while
Just
you're
kind of squeeze it
out into your mouth. So it was quite funny. They all thought it was really funny to see this white guy standing there not knowing how to eat this thing that they all eat. And so it was a good experience to be able to go through that. But they were telling us they've turned that into an income. This community is about an hour and a half drive from Kigali, but they sell to the markets in Kigali now because they've produced this income from the farm.
And the project didn't set out to teach them how to do that. They set out to teach them the kitchen gardens, and then on their own they said, oh, look what we can do with this, and grew it on their own. That's really fantastic.
You know, when you think of the gift catalog that we have at ADRA, the ADRA gift catalog, you can buy a fruit tree. And these are the trees. Like this is what they're able to do with giving them a few fruit trees. They're able to take that and turn it into an actual farm. So it was really neat to be able to be there and see that. Yeah. One other thing that we got to participate in was a goat exchange.
Goat exchange. Okay.
So when you look in our gift catalog, this is the part that I really liked about going to Rwanda, is it brought the gifts from the gift catalog alive to me, because I was able to go and see, oh, this is real. Like, this is something that you can see the benefit. So the way they've done it is that those who are beneficiaries from the ADRA project, they were given a goat. But as the goats grow and they reproduce, now what they've done is it's kind of like paying it forward, where once they have an adult goat, they will pass that goat on to somebody else who didn't get a goat from the ADRA project. So we were there to watch this goat exchange where they were passing the goat over to their neighbors. It was really neat to be able to be there and see that take place.
They've already had a few kids already,
right?
So they weren't giving everything away, but it helped to spread the benefit of the project to many people.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I liked about it, is when you think about we typically report on our direct beneficiaries. So last year, we see, in 2018, we had 814,000 direct beneficiaries. But that doesn't count the number of indirect beneficiaries that come from our projects as well. Yeah.
Well, that's it for our video podcast today. I want to thank you for joining us and finding out more about our Promise project in the country of Rwanda. I know it may seem as though it kind of came to an abrupt close there without a sign-off from our group. What happened was when we sat down to record this podcast back in the first week of January, we actually were including two projects in the country of Rwanda, the Promise Project and the Embrace Project. And our original intent was just to have that as one video program, but there were so many exciting things to share in that report that it went too long for one podcast. And so we have broken it down the middle. And in our next podcast that we release, we will be sharing the rest of the story about our work in Rwanda, all about the Embrace Project. So be sure to come back and join us for that episode as well. For now, I want to thank you for your interest in the work of ADRA and say so long for now.